Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze how N'Golo Kante and Christian Pulisic played a key role in exposing Zidane's pressing scheme. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have both sides starting the game in a 3-5-2, and what we often see when both sides do adopt identical systems is that they're able to cancel each other out. For instance, here in a 3-5-2, the wingbacks are against the wingbacks, the midfield battle is 3v3, and the center backs have a 3v2 advantage against the forwards. So in this video, we're going to break down how both sides look to approach the game, how Madrid looked to press, how Chelsea were able to exploit that press, and then focus on how Madrid adjusted in the second half. So first we'll focus on Chelsea's pressing, and what we ended up seeing was that Werner and Pulisic were stepping to Varane and Nacho, and Mason Mount was pushing higher up the pitch to close down Militao. That would often see Chilwell and Azpilicueta stepping forward to close down the wingbacks. But one of the main tactical themes involving Zidane's approach was that Marcelo was pushing forward into a central position beyond Jorginho and Kante, and Toni Kroos was dropping off into an inside left channel. That meant that Madrid had Modric and Kroos in deeper midfield positions towards the wider areas, and Jorginho would step out to close down Modric. But when you look at Kroos, you could have Kante pushing forward to close him down, but he often held his position, and we would see Pulisic drop off deeper while Azpilicueta shifted towards the movement of Marcelo. The other key tactical theme that we witnessed from Zidane's men is that with Chilwell and Azpilicueta pushing higher up the pitch, that's where you would see Benzema looking to shift into the space behind those wingbacks to get on the ball to drag out Rudiger, and there were times where you did end up seeing Rudiger stepping towards Modric, and if Benzema shifted into that zone, it would pull out Thiago Silva. Here we could see Mount shooting out to Militao with Pulisic tucking in narrow to close down Kroos, and then you still have Jorginho stepping to Modric, Kante near Casemiro, and then you could see Chilwell stepping towards Carvajal. If we look to another example, here you could see Chelsea's Chilwell staying a bit deeper because you have Benzema shifting into space towards the left of Rudiger, and that's where you end up seeing Jorginho stepping to Modric when Carvajal slides the ball across Mount. But ultimately, the main tactical focus here was on how Madrid looked to press Chelsea from the front and how Chelsea were able to get themselves into high quality positions. Because when you look at the Real Madrid press, it was Benzema and Vinicius stepping towards Thiago Silva and Christensen, and then they had Modric higher up the pitch to close down Rudiger. That leaves Carvajal and Marcelo stepping high to Azpilicueta and Chilwell. And then in that midfield zone, you would see Militao stepping towards Mason Mount, with Casemiro pushing to Jorginho and Kroos dealing with Kante. When Madrid were dropped off in their 5-3-2 base shape, Mason Mount was pushing higher up the pitch beyond Modric, and he was occupying Militao. Like I said, the wingbacks were pushed higher to peg back Marcelo and Carvajal, and then Werner was occupying Varane and Pulisic was occupying Nacho. So now it was down to Madrid's pressing to ensure that they did close down Kante and Jorginho, and that often saw Kroos stepping to Kante, but there were times where Casemiro couldn't push higher to close down Jorginho. That's where they needed Benzema to drop off deeper to close him down, because what we ended up seeing in the earlier stages was that it looked like Chelsea wanted to get Pulisic in behind. Rudiger was often the free man because Modric was deeper with Mount, who was pushing towards Militao, and then Jorginho wasn't often closed down by Benzema, and if Casemiro couldn't step, then he was free in that midfield zone. Here you could see Jorginho on the ball ahead of Modric, with neither Benzema or Casemiro stepping and Kroos ahead of Kante, while Werner's occupying Varane. When Jorginho looks to clip the ball over the top of the Real Madrid backline, it's Pulisic who made the run across Nacho into left half space, but unfortunately for Chelsea here, Pulisic ran offside. Shortly after that, it's Rudiger on the ball at the halfway circle, with Casemiro and Kroos stepping to Kante and Jorginho, but focus on Mason Mount shifting laterally beyond Modric. As Rudiger steps forward, you witness Mount in a pocket of space behind Modric pulling out Militao, Werner occupying Varane, and that's where you could see Pulisic making the run across Nacho. What happens next is that Pulisic does make that run into that Varane-Nacho gap, but you could see both Real Madrid defenders focused on the ball opposed to Pulisic's movement. Rudiger lofts the ball into left half space for Pulisic, and that places him in a legitimate goal-scoring position 1v1 with Courtois. What follows that is that look at Nacho positioning himself behind Courtois, and what's key here is the movement of Werner, who does look to break into the 6-yard box, and he ends up dragging Varane with him, which leaves Pulisic 1v1 with the keeper. From there, Pulisic's able to round Courtois, who does get his big hand out, but he's unable to stop Pulisic from getting the ball onto his right foot, and the American puts Chelsea up 1-0. However, while Pulisic's running did cause Real Madrid's backline problems in those opening minutes, it was Real Madrid's inability to press cohesively that led to their downfall. When you look at Chelsea's shape once again, Mason Mount dropping off deeper into the midfield zone along with Pulisic does create a midfield overload, and if Militao or Nacho couldn't step towards them, then they were able to pick up the ball freely. So it was often Pulisic's movement into deeper positions that created problems for Nacho and that Real Madrid midfield and backline, but it was N'Golo Kante also winning his battle with Toni Kroos by getting to the ball first to link with his teammates, or making runs off the Real Madrid midfielder into advanced positions. Here you could see Kroos on the ball ahead of Pulisic, with Kante dropping off into the midfield position for cover, Modric higher up the pitch, and Jorginho ready to step to Casemiro. When Casemiro receives Kroos' squared ball, you could see Jorginho stepping in to make a challenge, and look at Modric and the wingbacks caught beyond the play. When Jorginho wins the ball, it leads to Mason Mount breaking forward, and Militao now has to step across to attempt to make a challenge. But what Mount does well here is that he's able to skip beyond Militao's challenge and carry the ball forward, and that's where you see Werner running across Nacho and Varane, and Pulisic is now free to make a forward run into the right channel beyond Toni Kroos. Mount ends up carrying the ball towards left half space, and Modric does well to track his run, but as Mount looks to cut across Modric in left half space, you have Werner occupying Varane watching the play, and Pulisic running beyond Nacho. When that deflected ball is played towards the back post, Pulisic is now able to nod the ball across Nacho into the path of an unmarked Werner, but from that position in the 6-yard box, he's unable to beat Courtois, and he should be putting Chelsea up 1-0. Later on, we see Kroos and Casemiro stepping to Jorginho and Kante, and Christensen looking to slide the ball across Vinicius for Azpilicueta as Marcelo steps late. When Azpilicueta receives the ball, you could see Kroos stepping towards Kante, but Pulisic dragging Nacho out of position. Azpilicueta slides the ball across Marcelo for Kante, and that's where you see Kante instantly sliding the ball across Kroos for Pulisic ahead of Nacho, and it leaves Azpilicueta already breaking beyond the left wing back. When Pulisic receives the ball, he drops it off instantly towards Azpilicueta, which now pulls out Nacho, but look at the positioning of Kante and Pulisic beyond Kroos and Marcelo. Azpilicueta ends up poking the ball across Nacho for N'Golo Kante, and that's where you see Casemiro coming out to try and make a challenge as Werner drags Varane to the right touchline, and Pulisic now running beyond Marcelo. Kante pokes the ball into the path of Pulisic, and that now creates a 2v2 break, with Werner looking to break beyond Varane into right half space. But Pulisic hesitates on playing that pass, and as he continues to carry the ball towards Varane and Militao, that's where you see Werner holding his run, and now Pulisic can only slide it across Varane into right half space a bit late. But when he does that, Pulisic plays a heavy pass in towards the byline, and you could see his frustration as Werner's unable to get into a goal-scoring position. Following a Mendy kick over Vinicius and Benzema, you could see Marcelo attempting to get tight on Azpilicueta, but he ends up sliding the ball across the left wing back into the path of N'Golo Kante. When Kante receives the ball, you could see Pulisic dropping off into his own half to drag out Nacho, and Toni Kroos nowhere near Kante, who gets on the ball. The Chelsea midfielder ends up sliding it out to Azpilicueta, and it pulls out Nacho, but with Pulisic now occupying Cruz, it leaves a gap of space for Kante to break into when Azpilicueta receives the ball. Azpilicueta ends up sliding the ball across Nacho for Kante, but now there's no cover as Cruz was focused on Pulisic, and it leaves Kante a free gap of space to carry the ball into as Varane shifts across. What you end up seeing next is that Werner is calling for the ball beyond Militao, and he's hoping that Kante could slide the ball across the center backs, but the Chelsea midfielder doesn't do that, and he carries the ball into right half space with Varane cutting out the passing lane into Werner, and the only real passing option now is Pulisic breaking into that gap beyond Cruz and Nacho. Kante slides the ball into the path of Pulisic, but he's instantly closed down by Cruz and Nacho, and he's forced to slide the ball square into the path of Chilwell. But when Chilwell receives the ball, he's closed down by Carvajal once again, and from that position he ends up scuffing his effort wide of the net. And if we look to one final example, it's Christensen clearing the ball to Kante, and look at Marcelo, Cruz, and Casemiro ball watching as Pulisic's looking to run off Toni Kroos. Kante ends up splitting both Casemiro and Cruz to place Pulisic in a position where he could run at the center backs, and what you should also focus on here is Werner looking to move forward down the right channel. As Pulisic carries the ball towards the backpedaling Real Madrid center backs, he now has the ability to slide the ball across Varane into Timo Werner to break forward into a 1v1 position against Courtois. When Pulisic slides the ball into that zone, you could see Mason Mount calling for a cross-field pass across Militao, but Werner opts to cut the ball onto his right foot, and he looks to break into right half space, but Varane shows him that way knowing that the angle is tight. When Werner ends up breaking into that zone, he ends up firing a shot wide of the net. So when we look back to the board and focus on how Zidane rectified that mistake, he simply had his midfield bank dropping off a bit deeper, so that would end up seeing Rudiger carrying the ball forward freely, but Modric was blocking off the passing lane into Mason Mount as Militao stepped tight towards him. If Mount was in that midfield zone, Modric would step towards him, and if Rudiger was looking to push forward, Modric would only apply pressure by blocking off that passing lane into Mason Mount. Zidane's slight tactical alteration negated the space that Chelsea could break into in the midfield zones, and now they could solely rely on the runs of Azpilicueta or Chilwell beyond the Real Madrid wingbacks, or Pulisic and Werner breaking in behind. So as you could see, Zidane's decision to bring Modric deeper balanced out the midfield zone, and it negated the space that Chelsea could break into so successfully in that opening half. It was also beneficial to the first phase of their build-up play, as now Modric could drop off deeper with Mount stepping towards Militao, and it would help Kroos evade the pressure that he was facing from Pulisic or Kante. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.